up further into next week.
The man who wants to be the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, sits down with me, Esther McVeigh and Philip Davis this Saturday. Don't miss it. Does the former Chancellor have what it takes to beat his rival, Liz Truss? Can he regain the momentum he's lost over the last couple of weeks? All questions and all answers put to the Tory leadership hopeful, Rishi Sunak, tomorrow, 10 a.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We're trying to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Bev Turner, on your TV, radio and online. I'm with you until midday today. We've got a show jam-packed with all of the biggest stories, discussion, guests, opinions, as well as yours. Make sure you get in touch with your views, as usual, on gbviews@gbnews.uk. We have got so much to get through. Leadership battle. We're going to be talking about Breastfeeding Week. We're talking about the Commonwealth Games and lots more as well. So get in touch with your views throughout the show, won't you? It is, first of all, though, of course, time for the latest news headlines with Simon Pusey.
Thanks, Bev. It's 2 minutes past 10. I'm Simon Pusey in the GB newsroom. The two candidates vying for the Conservative Party leadership position have clashed over warnings of a recession from the Bank of England. The central bank predicts the UK will face its longest recession since the financial crisis in 2008, as it increased interest rates by half a percentage point to 1.75%. The former Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, warned his rivals' economic plans would damage the country, but Liz Truss argued her plans provided the bold action that was needed to tackle rising prices.
It's not inevitable. We can change the outcome. I would immediately reverse the national insurance increase. I would also have a temporary moratorium on the green energy levy to save people money on fuel bills. But I'd also keep corporation tax low to make sure that we are attracting investment into our economy and doing all we can to avoid a recession.
Liz Truss there, but the former Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, says he wants to be honest with the country about the economic challenges ahead.
I'm not sitting here or standing here promising you tens and tens of billions of pounds of goodies straight away, because I don't think that's the right thing to do for our economy. I think it's risky. I think it risks making the inflation problem far worse and costing you all far more. I want to be straight with the country about the challenges we face and what is going to be required to fix them. And that's why I think you can trust me on this, because I'm prepared to do that, even though it's going to cost me politically.
But Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng told GB News he doesn't think raising taxes is the answer to bring the economy out of recession.
Well, look, I think Rishi performed well. I just don't buy his message. I don't think more of the same economically makes any sense. Liz was talking about the possibility of a recession, which isn't inevitable, but she talked about a recession in the first debate, which has been caused, as Rishi said, by inflation. But to deal with a recession by increasing people's taxes is not a very sensible thing to do.
A decision on whether Archie Battersbee can be moved from a hospital to a hospice is expected at the High Court later this morning. The 12-year-old's family have pledged to fight to the end so he can spend his final moments with dignity. Archie's been in a coma since April and has been the subject of a lengthy legal battle to continue his life support. Sir Keir Starmer has been found to have breached the MP's code of conduct by failing to declare several interests, including gifts from football teams. Parliamentary Standards opened an inquiry into the Labour leader in June after claims he was late in declaring earnings and hospitality from UK sources. The Commissioner has found Sir Keir failed to register 8 interests, but the breaches were minor and there was no deliberate attempt to mislead. A hosepipe ban for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight comes into force later today. Southern Water says the country is experiencing one of the driest years on record. River flows are about 25% lower than they should be at this time of year. So it's asking customers to limit their water until further notice. The measure will follow next week for South East water customers in Kent and Sussex. The American conspiracy theorist Alex Jones has been ordered to pay more than $4 million in damages after falsely claiming that Sandy Hook school shootings were a hoax. The case was brought to a Texas court by the family of one of the victims after Jones's followers harassed them and sent them death threats. The jury is now expected to deliberate on whether he should also pay punitive damages to the parents. Russia says it's willing to discuss a prisoner swap with the United States after the American basketball star Brittany Griner was given a 9-year prison sentence for drugs offences. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov warned the US against using what it called megaphone diplomacy, saying it could derail any negotiations. President Biden called Griner's sentencing unacceptable after the star was found at Moscow airport with a vape cartridge containing cannabis oil. China has sanctioned the US House of Representatives Speaker and her immediate family following her visit to Taiwan. The Chinese Foreign Ministry has accused Nancy Pelosi of interfering in China's internal affairs and threatening the peace and stability of Taiwan. Beijing has launched a number of missiles into waters near Taiwan in response to Ms. Pelosi's visit, saying the US is playing with fire. UK footfall stalled in July as record temperatures and the rising cost of living deterred people from visiting local shops. The British Retail Consortium says total footfall fell by 14.2% in July compared with 3 years previously. It also says shopping centre visits were down almost 25% on 3 years earlier. And electricity was stolen a record number of times last year as people try to keep their lights on amid a growing energy crisis. Tampering with a line or bypassing a meter can cause serious injury or lead to up to 5 years in prison. Home Office figures show England and Wales police received more than 3,500 reports in the year to March, up 13% on the year before. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens now. It's back to The Point with Bev.
Good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Bev Turner, on your TV, radio and online. We've got a great show lined up to kickstart your weekend. So here's what's on the menu. Tory leadership candidates Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss rowed over the Bank of England's recession warning, defence spending and housing last night. But what was said about the illegal immigrant situation in the English Channel? Our Home and Security editor Mark White is there in Dover to tell us more a little later. Meanwhile, in Scotland, more than 1 in 4 fixed penalty notices for breaching COVID rules were given to people in deprived areas. I think this is fascinating. This is according to a new report from Edinburgh University. So what does this say about how these rules were enforced and who was breaking them? We're going to be asking about the report with the author, Professor Susan McVie, about the findings later. And there are more than 1 million CCTV cameras in the UK that are made by Chinese state-owned tech companies. They've already been blacklisted in the United States over security concerns. So should we do the same here before all of our data is sent off to China? Should we be worried about this? I will be investigating that a little more later in the show. We've got all of that coming up and much more across the programme. You can get in touch, as always, with your views on GBViews at gbnews.uk. Now, which of the Tory leadership candidates was on the money last night? Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss clashed over their plans to deal with a predicted economic recession, which was forecast by the Bank of England, of course, yesterday. It's all over the papers today. Both of the PM wannabes laid out competing plans in last night's debate. But what were they? Well, Ms Truss has pledged a package of tax cuts worth £30 billion soon after she enters office.
And what's important is, first of all, that we need to help people struggling with the cost of living. I would immediately reverse the national insurance increase. I would also have a temporary moratorium on the green energy levy to save people money on fuel bills. But I'd also keep corporation tax low to make sure that we are attracting investment into our economy and doing all we can to avoid a recession.
But Mr Sunak, who has trailed Ms Truss, of course, in recent polls, has repeatedly said that he would prioritise bringing down inflation before cutting taxes if he became Prime Minister.
I think the government's #1 priority should be grappling with inflation. That's what I want to do. But it all starts with not making the situation worse. Because if we just put fuel on the fire of this inflation spiral, all of us, all of you, are going to just end up with higher mortgage rates, savings and pensions that are eaten away, and misery for millions. I don't want that to happen, and that's why I am so focused on gripping inflation first.
So whose policies are recession-proof and how well did they go down with last night's audience? Here is our knows everything political correspondent Tom Harwood to explain. Who won last night, Tom, simply, in this talent competition? Who came out on top?
Well, we don't have empirical data off the back of last night's event. Unlike the BBC debate, the Channel 4 debate and the ITV one, there wasn't a snap poll done by a polling company to get what Conservative Party members thought about it, or indeed what the wider public thought about it. What we do have is the studio audience compiled by Sky News, who were asked to raise their hands at the end of the event, and Rishi Sunak got about 2/3 of the audience raising their hands for him, only about 1/3 for Liz Truss. But there's a bit of a caveat here, which is that Sky News said that their audience was made up of undecided Conservative voters. And if we're Conservative members, I should say. And if we're going to go by what YouGov have found this week, only around 11% of Conservative members at this stage are undecided. So that's smaller than Liz Truss's lead, about 1/3 of the size of Liz Truss's lead over Rishi Sunak. So even if every single one of those undecided voters went for Rishi Sunak, that wouldn't change the outcome of the race were the polls to be absolutely accurate. So to some extent, we should take that raise of hands at the end of it with a pinch of salt. Interesting in the room, but not entirely indicative of where the entire membership might be.
I guess what is interesting about that, though, is what it tells us about how the two candidates might perform on a national scale, given if they were running for a general election. Because in a sense, what that tells us that if you are a wavering voter, Rishi Sunak won over more people last night than Liz Truss, and that might translate to the country, to the whole of the electoral?
So to some extent, but there are some caveats there. Of course, if you're a wavering Conservative Party member by this stage, there's a reason why you haven't chosen to back Liz Truss, the runaway favourite, with all of the endorsements of all of those big beasts in the Conservative Party that we've come to know. So the reason why some of these people might have been wavering might weigh into that fact, why they were leaning more towards Rishi, although it's undoubtable. He put forward a slick performance. He had answers to the questions. He had clearly prepared well and came across as a fairly slick performer.
You've been watching them so carefully on our behalf. I'm so glad you're having to, because I'm not sure how many of our viewers would want to sit through every single...
I could almost quote their lines word for word by this point,
I bet you could.
Honestly.
Sit through every hustings and every debate. Who has improved the most in terms of their performance during this period of time, would you say?
So most improved, undoubtedly, is Liz Truss. The way that she performed in that first Channel 4 debate was very ropey. Many people were saying that might have knocked her out of the contest. The way she improved over the next few debates and in these hustings, it's like watching a completely different politician. Now, that's not to say that she's miles ahead of Rishi Sunak in terms of presentation now. It's to say that she's improved a huge degree. Rishi Sunak has always been very polished, very proficient in terms of... So he hasn't improved a lot, but he's stayed at a very high level. Really what we're seeing now is two people who are competing at a very, very high level in terms of presentation.
She looks like she's just gaining confidence, and the more she's out there, and she is a bit socially awkward, isn't she? I don't know if you've met her in real life, or whether you know, is she a bit socially awkward in real life as well?
Well, I think all politicians to some extent are not particularly normal people, but yes, I think it's fair to say that Liz Truss would say that herself, and she has said herself on a number of occasions, that she's not the slickest performer when it comes to that. But I think there's an interesting parallel that might be drawn between where Margaret Thatcher was in 1975, when she was elected Conservative Party leader. She became Prime Minister 4 years later, had a long time to run into it, so perhaps that's a difference, because obviously the next Prime Minister will be Prime Minister from day one they're elected as Conservative Party leader. But famously, Margaret Thatcher went through all of these vocal training lessons, all of these stature and indeed image consultancy. She started off as opposition leader, having a huge amount of attacks at her for her voice, the way she spoke. The leader of the opposition at the time, I think, said, the Honourable Lady doth screech too much. The leader of the Prime Minister, I should say.
And she did change, didn't she? I've got to ask you before you go, Tom. Keir Starmer's in a bit of trouble. This hasn't made many headlines this morning. What's he been up to?
It hasn't, and perhaps if the economy wasn't headed towards 5 quarters of negative growth and 13% interest rates, this would be a bigger story. But Sir Keir Starmer has been found to have broken the rules of the House of Commons, not once, not twice, but 8 times. 8 times of breaking the rules of the House in terms of declaring income, in terms of declaring income in kind as well. Now, it should be said that the Standards Commissioner for the House has said that these were minor breaches, but these were breaches nonetheless. And it has to be said that a number of people have faced what might be described as minor breaches, as things equivalent to parking fines or whatever else, and have faced an enormous amount of scrutiny. Sir Keir Starmer saying that he's apologised, he's making sure that it won't happen again, but 8 times that he's breached these rules in terms of declaring financial benefits. Now, these are either late declarations or not declaring them. It's a fairly significant story, if not for ill intent, at the very least for bad organisation.
Yeah. All right, Tom. Thank you very much. Amazing, isn't it, that he's got... Keir Starmer's managed to sort of duck under the radar of all of that. If that was Boris Johnson, it would be very different. Anyway, right, OK, this week, 1,100 migrants have crossed the English Channel to Dover in small boats. This follows the publication of a 10-point plan to tackle migration issued by Tory leadership candidate Rishi Sunak. Meanwhile, Liz Truss says that she would support and extend the government's controversial Rwanda deportation policy. So our Home and Security editor, Mark White, joins us now from a very lovely-looking Dover there, Mark. Tell me how... You know, we've had this influx this morning of we're hearing the numbers coming over. How has the potential Prime Minister's statements gone down there with the locals?
Well, they certainly want something done. If you speak to people along the Kent coast, it is a problem that they live with every day. It is a lovely day today. It is a bit windy, though, which means that it's pretty impassable for small boats coming across the channel. In fact, this week there have only been 2 days where the weather has been good enough for those small boats to make the crossing. But on those 2 days, just 2 days, we have had close to 1,200 people coming across on small boats. 696 at the beginning of the week there, a record day this year in terms of the numbers crossing. And then again yesterday, another significant day with 388 who crossed during the day. But then overnight, another 80 odd crossed in a couple of boats that were intercepted by Border Force and the RNLI. And in fact, in the early hours of this morning, they also intercepted a kayak that had taken to the water with one person on board trying to make the crossing in, by that time, pretty choppy conditions. So that chap was pretty lucky. I'm just going to give you a quick look over here just now, Beverly, because this is the main harbour area where those that are landed are taken up for processing, and down there are some of these rigid inflatable boats. I say rigid, they've got sort of makeshift wooden floors on them, but otherwise they're just these rubber mould inflatables that are bought to order in Turkey and then shipped to Germany, where they're partly assembled before being taken to northwestern France and then hidden along the coastline there, and then when the weather improves they all jump on board, get pushed out to sea. In fact, I think you can see the orange thing, that's the kayak in one of those vessels, the last one down there, just on the end. You can see inside there is something orange. That's the kayak, Beverly, that I was telling you about, that the chap was pulled off on this morning. And just reading the numbers on these boats at the moment, I think it's 474. They paint them on the boats just so they know what tally they're at. So that means 474 at least small boats have crossed the English Channel. And of course, when they come here, they go up this gangway. You all remember the pictures because we show them so often. Today, so far, in the early hours of this morning, 80 people have gone up the gangway for processing here at Dover Harbour. But because it is pretty windy now, it's going to be, pretty difficult, I think, for them to come across. So we're probably not expecting many more in the way of small boat crossings today.
Mark, I don't have time for any questions. Home and Security Editor Mark White there joins us from Dover. That is what we do at GB News. I think that sort of insight into that detail is so fascinating. It's so interesting. We hear about these things, don't we, as a kind of a theory of people arriving. It's hard to put any pictures to these stories. I just think it's so interesting to see the actual boats there. It makes a mockery of our immigration policy, though, doesn't it? Here we are, arrive, and then up you go, up the gangway into Dover. Amazing. Right, now, after the break, we're going to look at how the Bank of England's inflation warning will hit small businesses. There's a lot to talk about there. But first of all, on a beautiful day, the very important weather.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather outlook. Not much rain in the forecast across the south. A dry one here today and sunny for most of us through this weekend, thanks to a large area of high pressure that's slowly moving in across the country, and it's going to stick around through the weekend and beyond. This weather front will bring a bit more cloud tomorrow across the north. And today across the north, we do have some showers. We've already seen one or two heavy ones and a scattering of showers over North Wales, northern England, and parts of central and eastern Scotland will continue. Hit and miss, not everywhere seeing them, but where they do occur, so the odd heavy one is possible, but tending to ease off, I suspect, through the afternoon. Sunny spells for western Scotland, Northern Ireland, and across the south, where temperatures getting into the mid-20s, high teens, low 20s for most. So actually a little cool for the time of year. It'll be a fairly cool evening as well. Still a few showers around this evening if you're heading on the roads across northeast England, eastern Scotland, but they'll quickly fade away. For most, it's going to be a dry night, but that weather front we saw earlier will start to bring the rain back to the Highlands of Scotland and the Western Isles through the early hours. A fresh start to the weekend. It really will be quite a cool night, certainly compared to earlier in the week. Temperatures widely down to single figures. A sunny start to the weekend, certainly for most of England and Wales. A cloudy start for Scotland and Northern Ireland. There will be some rain pushing through parts of Scotland, but come late morning, it'll mostly be confined to the far north, with just a few showers likely through the central belt. The odd shower for Northern Ireland, mostly dry here. Certainly sunny spells for the majority across England and Wales. And after a cool start, feeling pretty warm from mid-morning onwards into the mid-20s through the afternoon. On Saturday evening, again, most places set fair, just a bit more of that rain lingering across northern Scotland, where it'll also be fairly breezy. There'll be some patchy rain across northern and western parts of Scotland on Sunday, but otherwise, again, most places dry, and we are going to see temperatures starting to rise through the weekend into next week.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Step into the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good morning, it is 10:25. This is To The Point with me, Bev Turner, on GB News. We are on your TV, we are online, we are on your radio, we're on the app. You can't escape us, even if you wanted to. Now, the UK economy is facing its longest recession since the 2008 global financial crisis. The Bank of England has warned. They say that inflation is likely to hit 13% this year, but how will that affect small businesses? GB News reporter Paul Hawkins is in Malden in Essex with a small business owner who could be feeling the pinch this year. Good morning, Paul. What have you heard down there about how businesses are feeling about these pretty dire warnings?
Yeah, morning, Bev. Really difficult climate at the moment for businesses. Remember, homeowners are protected by the cap when it comes to energy, but businesses aren't shielded from those energy rises. So it's really difficult for a lot of businesses, which in a place like Malden, small town by the Essex coast, lots of independent shops here, lots of small little boutiques. Businesses are really struggling, and we've been in the Crystal Cafe this morning. The owner is Mustafa Mehmet, who we can talk to now. He's just out the back making some breakfast, I think. Here he is.
I'm on telly now. Right. Hello there.
Muz.
Yes,
right.
sir. Hello there, sir.
Hello. What an appearance that was, the way you came through the door there. Thanks for speaking to us on GB News. First of all, how difficult is the current climate to run your business in?
Very difficult at the moment, where everything's gone up, with the electricity's gone up so sky high, where we were paying 14%, we're paying 28, 32%, so it's doubled. With the stock and everything's gone up.
Yeah.
They're charging a service petrol to come down here now,
yeah.
The diesel.
Yeah.
So everything's gone up. Minimum wage has gone up, stock's gone up, everything's gone up.
And you've kept your prices the same, right?
Yes.
So you've absorbed those costs.
Yes.
So you're making less money.
Well, I'm making less money, but it's such a big competition out here now, and we've got to try to keep the regulars in and certain people in.
Yeah.
But saying that, there's more catering places have opened up,
yeah.
Where Witherspoon and other places and other big places, they're all opening up, so there's a big competition out there.
Yeah. And
a lot of it I'm doing myself, a lot of work, and I'm a few part-timers.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's tough.
And you've been here 17 years. Have you ever known it to be this bad?
No, since 2005.
Yeah. So you even went through the great financial crash in 2008. You've been through that, and this is worse.
Yeah, this is worse now, yeah, because like the cost, there's nothing you can do with electricity. You know, you have to have your electricity on. How much cutbacks you do, you have to have all your grills, you have to have everything gone. So, you know, and when the bill comes, where you were paying 380s to 420s, you're paying doubled now.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do. You know, you can't run a business without your electricity.
And even shopping around for stock. That's pointless as well now.
Stock has all gone up as well, and there was a place where I go and pick up for a few bits. By the time you do your petrol, you're not saving much.
Yeah.
You know, all right, I do a lot of travelling where I was paying £60, £70, £80 a week. I'm paying £120. So all the £30 here, 50, 100 and something now, it all mounts up at the end of the week. Put it by the end of the month, it's all mounted up.
And you told me you've renewed your electricity tariff for 2 years recently? Or not that long ago?
Not that long ago.
But then you said to me, that's if you can get through the next 2 years to the other side.
Well, yeah, because obviously if you can't get through and then you're putting all your money into something and you can't survive it, you can't keep it going.
So you think you may not be able to keep going if it carries on like this?
Well, I'm hoping not to think of that way.
Sure, of course.
I'm sure. I'm a strong, I'm hoping not to be that. I'm putting some hard work in it at my age still, trying to keep and make a living out of it. You know, but it's tough.
Yeah.
I work 7 days a week. You know.
And just very quickly, what would you like to hear from Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss when it comes to how they could help businesses like yours?
If they can help us, if they can fund us, if they can keep it going, if they can keep the electric down or cut the electric, what it was, cut the petrol down.
Yeah.
You know, and other sort of things, you know, because everything is just gone up, you know, and they say they're importing this and...
You'd like some sort of grant? Something like that would be good.
Would be nice to keep us going.
Yeah.
Basically not for no... I mean, we can't see no savings at the moment. In businesses, you can't save. You'll be lucky, you know, you keep your head above water, basically.
Yeah. Okay.
Just to keep your things going, you know. Come in one hand, pay the other thing. Direct debit this, direct so... Yeah.
Listen, Mus, thank you for speaking to us. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you, sir.
There you go. And the thing the really interesting there, Mus was mentioning savings. Of course, it doesn't. You're going to get a little bit more interest on your savings after that bank rate increase yesterday. But inflation is so high that it's eroding those savings overall. So your savings are worth less. Really, really difficult for businesses and indeed all of us at the moment. And it's going to carry on well into next year.
OK, thank you, Paul. Interesting insight there, isn't it? I was listening to a really good interview with the Governor of the Bank of England this morning, which I'm sure we will be discussing a little later as well in various items on the programme. But he was saying that part of the big problem is the staffing shortage. I'd love to know why there are so few staff. I don't think it's just Brexit. I think a lot of people after furlough didn't want to go back to work. Anyway, after the break, the UK currently has more than 1 million Chinese-made CCTV cameras that were banned in the USA over security concerns. So why have we still got them? We'll find out whether that's something we should be concerned about after the news headlines with Simon Pusey.
Thanks, Bev. It's 10:32. I'm Simon Pusey in the GB newsroom. The two candidates vying for Conservative Party leadership have clashed over warnings of a recession. The Bank of England predicts the UK will face its longest recession since the financial crisis in 2008, as it raised interest rates by 0.5 point to 1.75%. Former Chancellor Rishi Sunak warned his rival's economic plans would damage the country, but Liz Truss argued her plans provided the bold action needed to tackle rising prices. A decision on whether Archie Battersbee can be moved from a hospital to a hospice is expected at the High Court this morning. The 12-year-old's family have pledged to fight to the end so he can spend his final moments with dignity. Archie's been in a coma since April and has been the subject of a lengthy legal battle to continue his life support. Sir Keir Starmer has been found to have breached the MP's code of conduct by failing to declare several interests, including gifts from football teams. Parliamentary standards claim he was late in declaring earnings and hospitality from UK sources. It's found Sir Keir failed to register 8 interests, but the breaches were minor, with no deliberate attempt to mislead. A hosepipe ban for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight comes into force today. Southern Water says the country is experiencing one of the driest years on record. River flows are about 25% lower than they should be at this time of year. So it's asking customers to limit their water until further notice. The measure will follow next week for South East Water customers in Kent and Sussex. And electricity was stolen a record number of times last year as people try to keep their lights on amid a growing energy crisis. Tampering with a line or bypassing a meter can cause serious injury or lead to up to 5 years in prison. Home Office figures show England and Wales police received more than 3,500 reports in the year up to March, up 13% on the year before. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. Then the pound is 1.214 to the dollar. The pound is 1.187 to the euro. And the price of gold currently stands at £1,472.12 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We're trying to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good morning. Thank you for joining me. I'm Bev Turner. It is 10:36. You're watching and listening to The Point on GB News. We are live on your TV, online and radio this morning. Now, a new report has shown that people living in the 10% most deprived areas of Scotland were more than 2.5 times more likely to be handed a fixed penalty notice for breaching COVID rules than those who didn't live there. In fact, more than 1 in 4 fines issued in Scotland were given to people who lived in deprived areas. I think this is so interesting. Is this because they broke the rules more often than, say, our leaders in Westminster? Or is there something fishy going on with the way that these rules were monitored? So here to tell us more is the author of the report, Professor Susan McVie of Edinburgh University. Good morning, Susan. Thank you so much for joining us. Who commissioned this report, first of all? Who were you collating this for?
I was part of an independent advisory group that was established by the Scottish Police Authority right at the very beginning of the pandemic in April 2020. And the purpose of the advisory group was to provide scrutiny around the police use of the new powers that they'd been given under the coronavirus regulations. So the research that I did was undertaken as part of that scrutiny role, and we were monitoring the police use of the powers right throughout the pandemic. This report that's been published yesterday is a kind of culmination of all the work that we've done over the last 2 years.
Your main findings, I've mentioned some of them, particularly the fact that those in more deprived areas were more likely to be fined for breaching COVID rules. Why?
Well, unfortunately, the data doesn't exactly tell us why, although there are some clues. So the data tells us that over the entire pandemic, those people who were living in the most deprived areas were more likely to be issued with fines, and by a factor of about 2.5. However, the more interesting thing is that we see a distinct shift over time in that social profile of who is being subject to enforcement. So during the first lockdown, when we were all told to stay at home and the most strict kind of regulations were put in place around what we could and couldn't do, we actually saw that the difference between the top and the bottom of the deprivation spectrum was 12. In other words, people in the 10% most deprived areas were more than 12 times more likely to be fined than those in the least deprived areas. However, that social gradient changed over time. So by the time we got to the second lockdown, those people in the most deprived areas were less than 2 times more likely to be issued with a fixed penalty. So what that's telling us is, first of all, that the reasons and the types of breaches of the coronavirus regulations changed over time. And it also tells us that the people that were breaching the regulations changed. In other words, as the pandemic wore on, there was more kind of waning of compliance, more lockdown fatigue. We actually see breaches amongst a wider swathe of the Scottish population.
So, I mean, it's a shame, Susan, that you can't. Are you interested in doing a second report into looking into the reasons why, or is somebody doing it? Because it raises so many more questions than answers in a way, this report.
Yes, it does. I mean, it's answering certain questions that we set out to answer. We are still continuing to do work. So we're funded by the UKRI on a project called Policing the Pandemic in Scotland. We've just finished interviews with police officers about their impressions of why people were breaching the regulations, and we're about to start interviews with members of the public who were issued with fixed penalties to find out more about why they were breaching. What we can tell you, though, from what we already know, is that there appear to be 4 different types of rule breakers, if you like. So there were the accidental rule breakers. These were the people who breached the regulations inadvertently. They didn't realise that they'd gone more than 5 miles from home, or they didn't realise they could have, no more than 3 people in their household, these sorts of things. Now, for the most part, the police in Scotland, as well as across the UK, dealt with the accidental rule breakers by means of what they call the 3 E's. That's engaging with people, explaining the rules to them, and then encouraging them to comply. So the next group are the vulnerable groups. So we know that there are a number of people who perhaps had mental health issues, drug or alcohol addictions, or for whatever reason felt they could not comply with the regulations. And so they were going out more often than they should have been, or they were, they felt they couldn't not get together with friends or family because it was it would have an adverse effect on their mental health.
Yeah.
Again, the police were kind of dealing with them in a low level. We also have the deliberate rule breakers who the police described as people that generally wouldn't follow social rules no matter what was in place. And more interestingly, I think, we have the unusual suspects. These are people that the police describe to us as individuals who they would normally only ever have contact with if they had been a victim of crime. So what we see is that over time, people from backgrounds that are normally very compliant with the law were breaching the coronavirus regulations, and they were doing that in ways that they were making a kind of cost-benefit analysis about what the impact of that would be, but what the benefit would be to themselves.
Yeah, well, I am a standard flag bearer for Category 4, Susan. I am one of those people who looks at the cost-benefit and realised that, frankly, a lot of this, the calculations were wrong and the equations were wrong, and that as a young, in inverted commas, healthy person and my young, healthy children, I was going to go to the park and woe betide anybody that tried to stop me. What does it tell us a little bit about the policing, though? Did they find it hard? I think the police probably would fall into some of those categories as well. Those who didn't want to step in and become agents of the state under the auspices of a crisis, and those who, frankly, rose to the challenge of wielding a little more influence than was perhaps necessary.
Well, I think overall the police found it incredibly challenging. During the first lockdown, I think it was relatively easy. We had very clear rules. We all, for the most part, knew exactly what we had to do, and so the police found that easy to enforce. The difficulty for policing came as the rules started to relax and they became more complicated. And if you remember back to those kind of, that middle period of the pandemic when rates started to change, the rules were changing sometimes on a daily basis, so they were changing frequently, at high speed. The police were not given any advance warning of the regulations, so they were having to get to grips with them at the same time that members of the public were, and they were also becoming more complex. What you could and couldn't do, there was more loopholes creeping in, there was more kind of, exceptions that could be applied, and that's when the police find it really difficult. Bear in mind also that as the kind of lockdown fatigue started to bed in and the public compliance was waning, the police were getting increasingly frustrated as well. They were frustrated that they weren't prioritised for the vaccine. They were frustrated that people were not complying, and they were potentially putting themselves at risk by going into households.
Well, I mean, they weren't, were they? But they sort of weren't. But Susan, I could talk to you all day. When you've gone away and done the research and looked at the why, come back and we'll have another conversation. But thank you. I think it's really interesting. It's a really interesting report, and we're really grateful for you doing it. And hopefully any lessons that have been learned will mean that we don't get in this situation again next time. Thank you, Professor Susan McVie there of Edinburgh University. Now, quickly moving on. The UK is one of the most surveilled countries in the world, with the amount of security cameras we have in our shops, on our streets, in our schools and offices, numbering over 6 million, roughly. That is according to the civil liberties group Big Brother Watch, whose data suggests that for every 10 citizens of the UK, there is always one camera watching them. But what if those cameras belonged to another country? Well, more than 1 million Hikvision CCTV cameras are installed and operated across the UK, cameras which are made by a Chinese state-owned technology company. They've already been banned in the US over security concerns. So why do we still have them here? Well, joining me now is Jake Herford, Head of Research and Investigations at Big Brother Watch. Jake, lovely to meet you. I'm a massive fan of what you guys do, and I think it's really important work. Some of our viewers will still subscribe, and understandably, to the notion if you have nothing to fear, you have nothing to hide from surveillance.
I mean, the first thing is you have to think about these cameras is Hikvision are complicit in genocide. Their cameras provide the surveillance apparatus in Xinjiang against the Uyghurs. They've made a camera that just watches people in a chair called a tiger chair, which is used to restrain people in difficult positions and put them in a lot of pain and force them to confess.
Right.
They provide the cameras that sit in prison cells for people in so-called re-education camps. So you have to think, you've got nothing to hide and nothing to fear. These are the cameras that are watching your kids in 60% of schools, they're watching in 6% of hospitals, and even 1 in 3 police forces are using them. So there are 2 questions. One about should the CCTV exist, which Big Brother Watch is calling for a major review because we think there's too much of it, it's becoming too prevalent. There's also Hikvision, and this company has no place operating in this country because they are complicit in crimes against humanity.
So I guess, if they're in hospitals and schools, this is government, it's our governments who are buying this, not private companies.
Well, there are a huge amount of private cameras as well, but yes, my research in our report, Who's Watching You, found that 60% of public authorities that we FOI'd, about 4,000 FOIs went into this report, use Hikvision or Drought cameras, Drought being another brand sort of linked to the Chinese state. But more concerningly, they're all over Whitehall. They're outside the Home Office, DEFRA, Department of International Trade, Business. Now, thankfully, Health and the Department of Work and Pensions are getting rid of them. But so many government departments, particularly the Home Office, the heart of UK security, their building is guarded by Hikvision cameras. That put chills down my spine.
You have to laugh at it because it's just so extraordinary. Now, why has this happened? Is this naivety on the part of some civil servant who's bought these cameras?
I think so. So the Biometrics and Surveillance Camera Commissioner, Professor Fraser Sampson, calls them digital asbestos. They're put in by a previous generation, perhaps unaware or, you're right, naive about the risks posed by these cameras.
So what are those risks, Jake?
So, aside from human rights concerns, there have been study after study to find security flaws in Hikvision. Now, this isn't to say they are intentionally putting in sort of gaps where the Chinese state could perhaps get into it. But over in Italy, RAI, Italy's BBC, did an investigation and found that a lot of cameras there were pinging unknown servers in China. whether it's accidental or intentional, we have to be aware of where our data is going and where it is open to, because most of the cameras are connected to the internet. So it's that kind of awareness and think, OK, so what is the worst case? Who get access to this data? And in this case, it's the Chinese Communist Party. And whether that is just watching your kids in school, which, yeah, there may be nothing to hide, or whether it's watching the door of the Home Office, we have to think, where could this data be going and what damage could that do?
So would Hike Vision, is it Hike Vision? Is that what they're called?
Hike, there are sort of, there's two, people say either we say Hike Vision because we do, basically.
Yeah, OK, so that company would say, I guess, look, we just sell cameras, right?
Yeah.
That's all. What you choose to do with the cameras is up to you. If you want to watch Uyghur Muslims being tortured, as somebody's bought those, then I suppose if the Chinese state are using them for that purpose, though, right?
Well, I think they are through investment companies. Hike Vision are partially owned by the Chinese state, so it isn't just they're a Chinese company. They are partially owned by the Chinese state, but they have signed contract after contract after contract with local and regional authorities in China for mass oppressive surveillance. And this has been going on for a number of years. Joe, there are still some contracts for Hike Vision cameras being signed in 2022 and 2021 by British public authorities. Now, yes, maybe 10 years ago, you may not be aware of what's going on and you give people the benefit of the doubt. But now, if anyone who's signing a contract for this is have to give money to a company who are complicit in persecution.
What can people do in this country to try and stem the tide of this increasing surveillance that we're often not aware of?
So, first thing, Big Brother Watch is campaigning for a ban on Hike Vision. We're lobbying MPs. We have a great number of MPs across parties who are backing our campaign. There are MPs and parliamentarians from Baroness Helena Kennedy to Ian Duncan-Smith to Alistair Carmichael who are concerned about this and backing it. It's the first thing to lobby Parliament. You know, Health and DWP have got rid of them already, so there is progress. But it's show private companies and show the public sector you're not willing to have this surveillance. I mean, yes, it could be very, very expensive to remove all these cameras, but if you're willing to give up that much your privacy and take that security risk, perhaps it's worth it.
I think what you do is so important, you guys. I've said it before, and I try whenever I can to get Big Brother Watch on GB News, because I think it's a creeping invasion into our privacy. I think there are sort of malevolent intentions with some of this security. And it is the kind of stuff, though, that you require an awful lot of imagination, Jake, to work out where this goes, don't you? And you can be easily accused of being a Luddite that isn't moving with the times. What do you say to those people?
I mean, we're not opposed to technology at all. We're just thinking about what are the implications of on the privacy risks. So this campaign is focused on Hike Vision. Separately, we are calling for a review of all CCTV because it's the normalisation of surveillance. There are schools in the north of the country who are fight detecting and mass detecting Hike Vision cameras in their schools. That kind of surveillance being normalised, to me, isn't being Luddite, it's being aware of the privacy risks. Now, we promote open source software, we promote cybersecurity. We're not Luddites, we're just very much aware of the privacy and security risks technology can have, particularly when it's unchecked and often you're not sure where the data is going.
And the potential risks with that surveillance and the amount of control that we are willing to accede to governments or private companies. Jake Herford from Big Brother Watch, thank you so much. Great to see you. Now, the first hosepipe ban in the UK will come into force in parts of southern England from 5 o'clock today. It's being imposed on Southern Water customers in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. There might be a camera watching you to see if you're going to use your hose. Well, yesterday, South East Water announced a hosepipe and sprinkler ban for customers in Kent and Sussex, which comes into force later this month. Now, these bans mean that residents won't be allowed to water plants, fill paddling pools or even wash the dog with a hosepipe. It's hoped that the ban will reduce the amount of water used as officials report increasingly low reservoir levels because of drought conditions and a lack of rainfall. More bans could follow, of course, in other parts of the UK. So here to explain more about why this ban is in place is senior meteorologist at British Weather Services, Jim Dale. Hello, Jim. Nice to see you. Have we had significantly less rain this year than we have in recent times? Is that why we're in this position?
Yeah, I think we have. It really stems back to the winter time when we had a relatively dry winter and then followed by a dry spring. Now, we're not talking about Scotland here and parts of the north. We're talking seriously, really, if you draw a line from the Wash to the Bristol Channel, everything south of there, that's the drought zone, if you like. So yeah, a dry winter, a dry spring, and then a very dry early summer. So it continues.
And What do you think then, Jim, as a meteorologist, about this advice that we should be dobbing in our neighbours? Because there are letters landing on maps to tell people you've got a hose pipeline in your area, and if you see somebody, can you let us know?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I'm probably not the best person to actually ask that question to as a meteorologist. I watch the weather. I talk about weather and the impacts of it. Personally speaking, if I saw somebody do it, I'd tend to tell them rather than necessarily go and report it to somebody else. And if they carried on doing it, then probably time to say to somebody down the road, look, we're all in it together. If you're in those drought areas, then those impositions are there for a reason, and they're there to save water so everybody could use it in washing machines and in your daily lives, if you like, in what you normally do. So, look, I don't think it's a case of Big Brother in this one. I really case a soft hand, a soft word would probably suffice.
It feels, doesn't it, as though we're seeing these extreme weather conditions, what we're talking about now, more and more at the moment. If we are aware and if we have some joined up thinking in this country about the fact that we have less rainfall, why aren't the water companies, Jim? Again, it may not be your area of specialisation. You're a meteorologist, but
yeah, I know where you're going now.
Well, you know, I'm going to say leaky pipes, Jim. I'm going to talk about leaky pipes and the fact that we have several billion litres that we lose every year into the ground. That's frustrating for those of us who pay our water bill.
And you know what, Bev, you could have had this conversation and in 1990 and in the mid-1990s, I should say. It's a long-age problem. I mean, don't get me wrong, pipes have been replaced. I know that for a fact. But they perish over time. It's a natural process, if you like, that they don't last forever. So you do get cracks from time to time. But yeah, there's a lot of wastage. The water companies have to do better, I believe. And the weather will look after itself in the way that you've just described. We're going in a direction of more rainfall, less rainfall, I should say, a likely scenario for the summertime. That's always been the mapped on for where we are now in the climate cycle.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Jim. I think your connection is going a little bit wobbly there. You are in Thailand,
yeah, it is.
As well, as
it is a little bit. At least I spoke. That's fine. Thanks, Bev.
Thanks, Jim. Jim Dale there, meteorologist at British Weather Services. I'm going to ask him how they cope with the droughts over in Thailand, but he's gone. Now, a little reminder, briefly, every Wednesday, Mercy and I hand over our show to you. It is your show, full of your ideas and what you want us to talk about, what you think are the most important stories. I know it's only Friday, but let us know now the subjects that you would want us to cover next week on Wednesday, the questions that you want answering, who we should be talking to. We had loads of emails. We get them all week, so do keep them coming in, to the point, at gbnews.uk. And also keep your thoughts coming in to me this morning on email, gbviews@gbnews.uk. We're going to be back with more of today's top stories and plenty of your views after this very short break.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather outlook. Not much rain in the forecast across the south. A dry one here today and sunny for most of us through this weekend, thanks to a large area of high pressure that's slowly moving in across the country, and it's going to stick around through the weekend and beyond. This weather front will bring a bit more cloud tomorrow across the north. And today across the north, we do have some showers. We've already seen one or two heavy ones and a scattering of showers over North Wales, northern England and parts of central and eastern Scotland will continue. Hit and miss, not everywhere seeing them, but where they do occur, so the odd heavy one is possible, but tending to ease off, I suspect, through the afternoon. Sunny spells for western Scotland, Northern Ireland and across the south, where temperatures getting into the mid-20s, high teens, low 20s for most. So actually a little cool for the time of year. It'll be a fairly cool evening as well. Still a few showers around this evening if you're heading on the roads across northeast England, eastern Scotland, but they'll quickly fade away. For most, it's going to be a dry night, but that weather front we saw earlier will start to bring the rain back to the Highlands of Scotland and the Western Isles through the early hours. A fresh start to the weekend. It really will be quite a cool night, certainly compared to earlier in the week. Temperatures widely down to single figures. A sunny start to the weekend, certainly for most of England and Wales. A cloudy start for Scotland and Northern Ireland. There will be some rain pushing through parts of Scotland, but come late morning, it'll mostly be confined to the far north, with just a few showers likely through the central belt. The odd shower for Northern Ireland, mostly dry here. Certainly sunny spells for the majority across England and Wales. And after a cool start, feeling pretty warm from mid-morning onwards into the mid-20s through the afternoon. On Saturday evening, again, most places set fair, just a bit more of that rain lingering across northern Scotland, where it'll also be fairly breezy. There'll be some patchy rain across northern and western parts of Scotland on Sunday, but otherwise, again, most places dry, and we are going to see temperatures starting to rise through the weekend into next week.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good morning. You're watching To The Point on GB News with me, Bev Turner, on TV, radio and online. We are with you until midday with a show jam-packed with the biggest stories, discussion, expert guests and opinions, as well as yours. They've been coming in. I'm going to get to them. Make sure you get in touch with your views, gbviews@gbnews.uk. But first, it is time for the latest news with Simon Pusey.
Thanks, Bev. It's 1 minute past 11. I'm Simon Pusey in the GB newsroom. The two candidates vying for the Conservative Party leadership position have clashed over warnings of a recession from the Bank of England. The central bank predicts the UK will face its longest recession since the financial crisis in 2008, as it increased interest rates by half a percentage point to 1.75%. The former Chancellor Rishi Sunak warned his rival's economic plans would damage the country, but Liz Truss says the most important thing is getting the economy growing to avoid a recession. The former Chancellor Rishi Sunak says he wants to be honest with the country about the economic challenges ahead.
I'm not sitting here or standing here promising you tens and tens of billions of pounds of goodies straight away, because I don't think that's the right thing to do for our economy. I think it's risky. I think it risks making the inflation problem far worse and costing you all far more. I want to be straight with the country about the challenges we face and what is going to be required to fix them. And that's why I think you can trust me on this, because I'm prepared to do that, even though it's going to cost me politically.
But Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng told GB News he doesn't think raising taxes is the answer to bring the economy out of recession.
Well, look, I think Rishi performed well. I just don't buy his message. I don't think more of the same economically makes any sense. Liz was talking about the possibility of a recession, which isn't inevitable, but she talked about a recession in the first debate, which has been caused, as Rishi said, by inflation. But to deal with a recession by increasing people's taxes is not a very sensible thing to do.
A decision on whether Archie Battersbee can be moved from hospital to a hospice is expected at the High Court this morning. The 12-year-old's family have pledged to fight to the end so he can spend his final moments with dignity. Archie's been in a coma since April and has been the subject of a lengthy legal battle to continue his life support. Sir Keir Starmer has been found to have breached the MP's code of conduct by failing to declare several interests, including gifts from football teams. Parliamentary Standards opened an inquiry into the Labour leader in June after claims he was late in declaring earnings from hospitality and from UK sources. The Commissioner has found Sir Keir Starmer failed to register 8 interests, but the breaches were minor and there was no deliberate attempt to mislead. China's foreign ministry has announced the country is serving a number of diplomatic ties with the United States following a visit by US House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan. The country has also sanctioned Ms. Pelosi and her immediate family, accusing her of interfering in China's internal affairs and threatening the peace and stability of Taiwan. Beijing has launched a number of missiles into waters near Taiwan in response to the visit, saying the US was playing with fire. US media reports the White House has summoned the Chinese ambassador to condemn the escalating actions. American conspiracy theorist Alex Jones has been ordered to pay more than $4 million in damages after falsely claiming the Sandy Hook school shootings were a hoax. The case was brought to Texas court by one of the families of the victims after Jones's followers harassed them and sent death threats. The jury is now expected to deliberate on whether he should also pay punitive damages to the parents. Russia says it's willing to discuss a prisoner swap with the United States after American basketball star Brittany Griner was given a 9-year prison sentence for drug offences. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov warned the US against using what he called megaphone diplomacy, saying it could derail any negotiations. President Biden called Griner's sentencing unacceptable after the star was found at Moscow airport with a vape cartridge containing cannabis oil. A hosepipe ban for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight comes into force today. Southern Water says the country is experiencing one of the driest years on record. River flows are about 25% lower than they should be at this time of year, so it's asking customers to limit their water until further notice. The measure will follow next week for South East Water customers in Kent and Sussex. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to the Point with Bev.
Good morning. You are watching and listening to Bev Turner today. This is To The Point on a Friday morning on GB News. And here are our specials of the day. The Tory leadership hopefuls Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss have put forward more of their ideas on how to help families through this cost of living crisis. But how do their plans compare to the great economic policies of US presidents Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush? Well, Diana Fergot-Roth is going to be talking to me. She's an economist who advised those presidents. Meanwhile, Amnesty International has called out the Ukrainian army in a new report, saying that their activities are endangering the lives of Ukrainian citizens. Very interesting. The army has rejected their report. So what exactly is happening and who is right? I'm going to be talking to Ukrainian MP Andrei Osadchuk to explain the situation. And finally, the Commonwealth Games swimming champion Tom Dean, MBE, will be in this studio with his unparalleled 7 medals to tell me more about this record feat for Team England and our home nations across this fantastic couple of weeks of sport that we've had. We're going to be talking to him towards the end of the show. We've got all of that coming up and much more across the programme. And get in touch with me, as usual, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, though, which of the Tory leadership candidates was on the money last night? Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss clashed over their plans to deal with predicted economic recession, which was forecast by the Bank of England yesterday. Both have laid out competing plans in last night's debate. But what were they? Ms Truss has pledged a package of tax cuts worth £30 billion after she enters office. And
what's important is, first of all, that we need to help people struggling with the cost of living. I would immediately reverse the national insurance increase. I would also have a temporary moratorium on the green energy levy to save people money on fuel bills. But I'd also keep corporation tax low to make sure that we are attracting investment into our economy and doing all we can to avoid a recession.
All sounds pretty sensible to me. Meanwhile, Mr Sunak, who's trailed Truss in recent polls, has repeatedly said that he would prioritise bringing down inflation before cutting taxes if he became Prime Minister.
I think the government's #1 priority should be grappling with inflation. That's what I want to do. But it all starts with not making the situation worse. Because if we just put fuel on the fire of this inflation spiral, all of us, all of you, are going to just end up with higher mortgage rates, savings and pensions that are eaten away, and misery for millions. I don't want that to happen, and that's why I am so focused on gripping inflation first.
OK, well, to discuss his gripping a bit more is Sean Worth, Director of WPI Strategy and former Downing Street advisor, and political commentator Andre Walker. Sean, if I can come to you first, who were you most impressed by last night?
Well, I think, if you're looking at it objectively, Rishi Sunak, he's a class act. He always performs better. He's very slick, he's very smooth, he's got all the answers to every question. Liz Truss tends to falter. But her vision, her slightly more radical, more immediate platform, really, in terms of tackling issues like tax cuts, seems to be cutting across as a more appealing proposition to Tory voters. But that's at least what the polling is saying right now. The most interesting poll will come next week after voting has started, and then we'll see. But, my head says Rishi Sunak's right on the policy issues. Heart says I think Truss is going to win.
What about you? Who won for you last night in that debate?
Well, I was quite surprised, actually, simply because Rishi Sunak has been perceived to be, not particularly good in these debates. Admittedly, Liz Truss was a little bit wooden to start with. But, I think most people felt she came out on top overall. But last night, I think it really talked to Rishi Sunak. I mean, I think it's a surprise to anybody, isn't it? This guy's been in charge of the economy for the last couple of years, and really things have gone pretty badly wrong. But he did feel as if he was in his comfort zone. And so, frankly, because the ballot papers are going out as we speak, this might be a late surge by Rishi Sunak. I don't believe he's going to win, but I think it could potentially be closer than people were predicting a week or two ago.
Well, Sean, Tom Harwood was here earlier explaining that audience for the debate last night was made up of undecided Conservative Party members. And at the end of the session, 2/3 of those had sided with Rishi Sunak. And I was considering what that tells us about which of them would do best if they were leading the party into a general election, because by that measure, Rishi Sunak could possibly win over more people than Liz Truss.
Yes, I mean, I've worked in leadership election myself, and the classic conundrum between voters is often who's got the best political platform that appeals to me as a Conservative, and I think Truss has probably got that. But the other question in your mind is who will beat the Labour Party? And at the end of the day, the Conservative Party, it's 400 years old and it's had more or less ideological leaders along its way. But at the end of the day, it's usually a really quite pragmatic party. What it wants is to beat the Socialists, beat the Labour Party, and make sure you have a serious government that can control the economy in power. And that's why I wasn't surprised that the audience tended to pick Sunak, because, I mean, as you were saying, our colleague here, he was in his comfort zone because a lot of the questions were about the economy and what he would do to try and get inflation under control, cost of living. And he's got all the answers to that because obviously he's a former Chancellor of the Exchequer and he's a former banker and he knows finance very well. Liz Truss is less qualified on all of that. If people are looking for somebody to beat the Labour Party again, I think they'll probably pick Sunak. But the question is whether they'll prioritise that over can we finally get a Conservative agenda pushed out? Because we haven't had one. We've had rising taxes, we've had rising regulation, and a lot of the Conservative Party base wants that deregulation supply side reform platform.
Andre, do you agree that actually Rishi Sunak could be more popular with the wavering voters who maybe aren't party members of any particular shade, who are those who they will want to vote for Conservatives at the next election? My suspicion is that Rishi Sunak is not that popular with the public. I don't think he appeals to that many normal people.
No, and I think the Conservative Party in general has failed to recognise the catastrophe that they've meted upon themselves. Whilst I'm in Windsor here, which is the classic sort of blue wall seat, I'm originally from the red wall, from Lee. And if you think about those voters, some of these seats had huge majorities for the Labour Party. I think that Andy Burnham held Lee with a 25,000 majority at one point. Obviously went over to the Conservatives in 2019. There was that great hope that these people would vote Conservative for the first time and the Conservatives wouldn't let them down. I think it's fair to say that pretty comprehensively the Conservatives have let them down. Now, the big advantage the Conservatives have got is the Labour Party is the first political party in history to fire its own voters. Keir Starmer absolutely can't stand ordinary Labour people and certainly was keen to undermine them during Brexit. But, you know, I've got to be honest with my friends and colleagues in Windsor Conservative Association. I don't think that they take this problem seriously enough in the Red Wall. And certainly this idea of, oh, we'll just move Boris out the way for somebody else because we didn't like what he did over Partygate. I don't think it's going to be that easy. I don't think Truss or Sunak are particularly popular. My instinct is that Sunak is the worst of the two.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree. Sean, you said that Rishi Sunak is very slick, he's very polished, but he's too slick and he's too polished, isn't he, for a lot of British taste? Part of the appeal of Boris Johnson, love him or hate him, was the fact that he was rough around the edges and he had a philandering past. And he, you know, a lot of people kind of, for whatever reason, they liked that about him.
Yeah, so I think Sunak is a bit teetotal as well. So he might be the last person you want to go for a drink with. There's always a test, like, you know, could I go for a pint with this guy? But yeah, I think you're possibly right. He reminds me of Tony Blair in a way. He's, you know, he's got an answer for everything. He's very slick. I mean, I just think that, I don't think either are brilliant performers, to be honest, and the teams around them really need to be strengthened. But on balance, I mean, I think Rishi Sunak is a more competent person. You know, I'm slightly biased. I have an economics background, and I think what he's saying on the economy, although it's not very attractive or exciting, and we don't want to hear it, is the right thing. I can see a future in the next 2 years where the cost of living crisis really goes out of control, and the Tory party becomes incredibly unpopular. Sorry.
Sean, that did sound a little bit like a job pitch from you as a former Downing Street advisor. If you were, listen,
he's struggling with his energy bills. He's struggling. He needs some more work.
Aren't we all?
Of working in politics, I tell you.
But Sean, if you were going to advise Liz Truss, what would you tell her to do? Because I think, like Andre, my feeling is I sort of warmed to her. I didn't like Rishi Sunak during lockdowns. I didn't like him during the COVID pandemic. I didn't like his patriarchal, kind of paternalistic view of the nation that we should all be doing exactly what we were told. I didn't like it. And I like the fact that I feel that Liz Truss was a little bit more on the margins of a lot of those decisions. What would you advise her to do to win over those people like me who... You know, I voted promiscuously my whole life. I don't mind admitting that. In my whole voting life, I have voted for Liberal Democrats. I think I even voted for the Greens when I was a lot younger. I voted Tory, and I think I voted for Tony Blair. So, you know, what would you say to those people like me? What would you tell her to do to win over people like me?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is that, you know, her agenda is, if you're an economist, her agenda is at odds with the cost of living crisis. And I think as we get nearer to the general election, you know, that whole red wall that Andre talks about, you know, you want to see a Tory party not being particularly ideologically driven by its own member base in the southeast. You want to be speaking to, you know, pushing the economies up outside the southeast and having a serious agenda around that, of course, has got to be the priority. But, you know, if she wants to push a kind of more conservative, you know, red meat agenda, I'd maybe focus that more on the set of social issues like immigration, you know, this whole woke stuff. You know, I think there's a massive platform for attractive, you know, give all that stuff a kick, trans, all that, give all that a kicking. You know, should get a lot of support
Andre,
for that.
Sorry, Sean, I just want to put the last word to Andre very quickly. Andre, what would you suggest that Liz Truss should do to win over those red wall seats?
Well, look, the reality is to watch a Conservative leadership candidate make the moral case for higher taxes, I think is pretty ridiculous. The reality is what the northern seats want is genuine infrastructure. They want tax cuts. And I think they want to be recognised for once, and rather than just completely ignored in a Westminster system and an EU system in the past that was pretty undemocratic and unrepresentative of them. Look, there are still things to play for here, but, you know, this is a real problem for the Conservative Party.
OK, Sean Worth, Andre Walker, thank you ever so much for joining us. You might get a job out of that, Sean. Now, these economic plans may all be well and good for the United Kingdom, but how do they compare to other great leaders on the global stage? This is a question that I've been dying to kind of ponder. My next guest, Diana Furch-Gott-Roth, is a former advisor to Donald Trump on transport policy and a former economic advisor to George W. Bush and Ronald Reagan. She joins us today to discuss the cost of living crisis and how the US is handling it compared to the UK. Plus, maybe she'll be giving us her views on the latest on US politics as well. Good morning. Very nice to see you. Thank you, Diana, for joining us. How are things in America at the moment in terms of a cost of living crisis as we come out of the back of 2 years of chaos? How are the American people feeling about the state of their economy right now?
The American people hate inflation. They hate the high fuel prices. They hate the high food prices. So it seems exactly the same, except here inflation is only, and I say only in quotes, 9.1%. Whereas in the UK, it's 13%. But here we think it's very high.
Diana, is it almost unprecedented, the situation we're at the moment historically, that so many countries across the globe are suffering from exactly the same sort of economic and social problems?
It really is, Beverly, and that's partly because the pandemic was a global phenomenon. People stayed home for about a year. There were lockdowns. And then when employers wanted people to come back to work, it was difficult for some of them. Some of them had children at home. Some older people had retired. So we have these supply chain problems, which are not going away because of the shutdowns in China that are continuing because of its zero COVID policy. So we are going to be, I think, in trouble for at least another year, I would say.
And what does that look like, Diana, on a global stage? When you say we're going to be in trouble, what's the worst case scenario?
The worst case scenario is that we all have slower growth, slower economic growth for the next year or so. That's in terms of the economics. In terms of the geopolitical, we have a war in Ukraine. The United States has just poked China because Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, went over there. So in terms of the global geopolitical situation, which I'm not qualified to speak about because I'm only an economist, things could get a lot worse there also.
How does what Joe Biden is performing out there, what his economic measures over in America, how do they compare to what we are doing here at the moment? We've got this talent contest going on at the moment for who's going to be the next Prime Minister. Some days it's hard to work out who is quite in control here and what decisions are being made. What is Joe Biden doing to control the economy?
Well, it's exactly the same, Beverly. I mean, here there's a talent contest too, because people are saying, well, Joe Biden probably won't be running in 2024. People are also trying to pick the Republican candidate for 2024. So it's the same except 2 years earlier. But people are not happy with Joe Biden's handling of the economy. There's high inflation. Fuel prices have about doubled over the past year. Price of eggs has about doubled. Price of flour has gone up by about, 200%, tripled. So it's very difficult here also.
And Diana, you were a former advisor to Donald Trump. Do you expect him to come back on the scene politically in any significant way in the next couple of years?
No one knows. President Trump has always surprised people. No one knows what he's going to do next.
Oh, that was very diplomatic. But if he does, Diana, will you be lining up to help him out?
I will help whoever the Republican candidate is. It's very important to have low taxes, low regulation. It's important to get the economy going. The Democrats now, even though we've just heard America was in a recession the first part of the year, they want to impose a new 15% corporate minimum tax. We've just heard we're in a recession. It's no time to impose a new tax.
OK. All right. Thank you very much. Lovely to talk to you. Diana Furchtgott-Roth there, former advisor to Donald Trump and economic advisor to George W. Bush. Now, moving on, after the break, Amnesty International has called out the Ukrainian army in a new report saying that their activities are endangering the lives of Ukrainian citizens. We're going to have more on that after the break. But first, here is the weather.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather outlook. Not much rain in the forecast across the south. A dry one here today and sunny for most of us through this weekend, thanks to a large area of high pressure that's slowly moving in across the country, and it's going to stick around through the weekend and beyond. This weather front will bring a bit more cloud tomorrow across the north. And today across the north, we do have some showers. We've already seen 1 or 2 heavy ones and a scattering of showers over North Wales, northern England and parts of central and eastern Scotland will continue. Hit and miss, not everywhere seeing them, but where they do occur, so the odd heavy one is possible, but tending to ease off, I suspect, through the afternoon. Sunny spells for western Scotland, Northern Ireland and across the south, where temperatures getting into the mid-20s, high teens, low 20s for most. So actually a little cool for the time of year. It'll be a fairly cool evening as well. Still a few showers around this evening if you're heading on the roads across northeast England, eastern Scotland, but they'll quickly fade away. For most, it's going to be a dry night, but that weather front we saw earlier will start to bring the rain back to the Highlands of Scotland and the Western Isles through the early hours. A fresh start to the weekend. It really will be quite a cool night, certainly compared to earlier in the week. Temperatures widely down to single figures. A sunny start to the weekend, certainly for most of England and Wales. A cloudy start for Scotland and Northern Ireland. There will be some rain pushing through parts of Scotland, but come late morning, it'll mostly be confined to the far north, with just a few showers likely through the central belt. The odd shower for Northern Ireland, mostly dry here. Certainly sunny spells for the majority across England and Wales. And after a cool start, feeling pretty warm from mid-morning onwards into the mid-20s through the afternoon. On Saturday evening, again, most places set fair, just a bit more of that rain lingering across northern Scotland, where it'll also be fairly breezy. There'll be some patchy rain across northern and western parts of Scotland on Sunday, but otherwise, again, most places dry, and we are going to see temperatures starting to rise through the weekend into next week.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
Good morning. It's 11:27 a.m. This is To The Point with Bev Turner on GB News. We are live on your TV, online and radio this morning. Thank you ever so much for joining us. OK, Amnesty International has called out the Ukrainian army in a new report saying that it is endangering the lives of Ukrainian citizens. They say that the way the forces are using hospitals and schools as makeshift army bases, as well as residential buildings as camps, puts civilian lives at risk of Russian attack. They also insist that the country is not doing enough to evacuate citizens caught in the crossfire. The organisation's Secretary-General, Agnes Kalamard, says, "We have documented a pattern of Ukrainian forces putting civilians at risk and violating the laws of war when they operate in populated areas." So here to respond is Ukrainian MP Andrei Osadchuk. Your government has rejected this report. Andrei, good morning. Thank you for joining us. Why do you say that this report is wrong?
Good morning. Thank you for having me here. Look, in fact, starting February 24th of this year, we see the overall collapse of global architecture of safety and security. None of the smart organizations, starting from United Nations, no OSCE, no any other related humanitarian organizations, were able to prevent the war and to give strong response to Russians' aggression and Russian atrocity. That's reality. Only NATO and individual leadership of some Western countries, including United Kingdom, was able to organize the proper support to Ukraine and to ensure our ability to resist to evil. And now it is absolutely ridiculous when so-called smart humanitarian organizations are trying to equalize enemy and its victim. In fact, questioning the ability of Ukrainian nation and Ukrainian army to defend any street, any building, and any village of Ukrainian land. It's not only Ukrainian government who reject that. I'm just looking at the Twitter, and Melinda Simmons, the ambassador of United Kingdom to Ukraine, made it very clear. She said the only thing endangering Ukrainian civilians are Russian missiles and guns and murdering Russian troops. Full stop. If Russia stops invading Ukraine, there will be no danger. And I'm fully in line with the position of UK and ambassador to Ukraine. Only Russian military is the threat for Ukrainian citizens now.
Well, the UK alone, and we all sympathise and our hearts go out to civilians and soldiers in Ukraine, but the UK alone has given more than £2.3 billion to Ukraine to help the army. And I guess what this Amnesty International report is saying is that that money has not been used effectively to protect civilians. If we can take some of the points one by one, perhaps, the idea that the army were using hospitals and schools as makeshift army bases, is that true? Or are you saying that is categorically not true?
First of all that sounds like spies activity in Ukraine, because Amnesty International is publicly discussing things which, in fact, is a military secret in Ukraine. From where they're getting this information, I don't know. How much this information is reliable, I don't know. I know for sure just one thing, that United Kingdom and other Western countries are standing together with Ukraine. And now it's not even the time to calculate money, because we need to win this war together, because it's not the threat to Ukraine. We discussed that and agreed on that dozens of times, that it is a threat to entire West. Until the moment, we're extremely efficient in resisting to Russian invasion. And the Western support is going to Ukraine under full control of Ministry of Defense of Ukraine and all our Western allies who physically present in Ukraine. So that's why we reject all that stupidity from so-called humanitarian organization. And we insist that by making these statements, they're just helping evil. They're helping Russia to strengthening in this battle with the West.
So why would Amnesty International want to do that? What motive would Amnesty International have to spy on activities and then to distort that information in order to support Russia?
I know that during decades, it's not the first case when governments of different countries had questions to the Amnesty International. You may Google this issue in internet and you will see a lot of very interesting issues. From another hand, I may assume that it is also the evidence of how long the hands of Russian spider. During decades, Russia was investing billions into soft power instrument in international organizations and in political parties, political organizations all over the world, including UK, United States, European Union, everywhere. And now we see how very different voices in very different places of the world are trying to help Russia to freeze the contract, freeze the conflict, and to put a finger on the victim, which is Ukraine and which is the West. It is absolutely unacceptable, and I think the Western leaders shall react on that on the same way as UK ambassador did today morning.
OK, well, you've articulated your frustration very well. Thank you very much. Ukrainian MP Andrei Sadchuk, who absolutely rejects this Amnesty International report claiming that civilians have been put at risk by Ukrainian activities in that country. OK, now, after the break, Commonwealth Games swimming legend Tom Dean will be joining me to talk about the 7 medals, I think he's got them with him, that he's just won in the Games. And we'll be talking about the state of sport in this country. Are we giving enough sport provision for all the young people that we need to raise healthy here? But before that, a look at this morning's news with Simon Pusey.
Thanks, Bev. It's 11:34. I'm Simon Pusey in the GB newsroom. Some breaking news, and that is that the family of Archie Battersbee have lost a High Court bid to have him transferred to a hospice to die. The 12-year-old's family had pledged to fight to the end so he can spend his final moments with dignity. Archie's been in a coma since April and has been the subject of a lengthy legal battle to continue his life support. We'll have more news on that story coming up later today. The two candidates vying for Conservative Party leadership have clashed over warnings of a recession. The Bank of England predicts the UK will face its longest recession since the financial crisis in 2008, as it raised interest rates by half a point to 1.75%. Former Chancellor Rishi Sunak warned his rivals' economic plans would damage the country, but Liz Truss argued her plans provided the bold action needed to tackle rising prices. Sir Keir Starmer has been found to have breached the MP's code of conduct by failing to declare several interests, including gifts from football teams. Parliamentary Standards claims he was late in declaring earnings and hospitality from UK sources. It's found Sir Keir failed to register 8 interests in total, but the breaches were minor, with no deliberate attempt to mislead. China's foreign ministry has announced the country is severing a number of diplomatic ties with the United States, including top-level military, following a visit by US House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan. The country has also sanctioned Ms. Pelosi and her immediate family, accusing her of interfering in China's internal affairs and threatening the peace and stability of Taiwan. Beijing has launched a number of missiles into waters near Taiwan in response to the visit, saying the US is playing with fire. US media reports the White House has summoned the Chinese ambassador to condemn the escalating actions. TV, online and DAB, plus radio, this is GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GBNews.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good morning. Thank you for watching. This is To The Point with me, Bev Turner, on GB News. Now, breaking news. We've been covering this, of course, every day for the last few weeks on GB News, and I did a monologue about it yesterday with Mercy, and the family of Archie Battersbee have sadly lost a High Court bid to have him transferred to a hospice to die. The 12-year-old's family have pledged to fight to the end. His mother, Holly Dance, of course, has been doing amazing media appearances. And they wanted him to spend his final moments with dignity. Now, Archie's been in a coma since April. He's been the subject of a lengthy legal battle to continue his life support. We're going to have more from our reporter, Ellie, in just a moment when we can bring that to you. But that will be devastating news for the Battersbee family. As I was saying yesterday, I think that the least that this family should be afforded at this late stage is to have a little agency over where Archie can end his life away from the conflict and the negativity of that hospital space. Because I think for the whole family to move on, somehow that poor mother and father and all the sisters and brothers of Archie have to know that they can have some sort of control from this situation right at the end. I think Ellie's with us now, actually. I'm delighted to say that Ellie is joining us now. Ellie Costello, are you there, Ellie? She's down at the hospital. Ellie, very sad news for the family, and I think a lot of us who felt invested in this, and we were talking yesterday about wanting to have as good an end as possible for this little boy.
Yes, absolutely, Bev. This news has just broken this morning. Archie Battersbee's parents have lost their High Court bid to transfer him from the Royal London Hospital, which is behind us, to a hospice to die. That's the news that has just come in literally just a few moments ago, Bev. We know that the parents of Archie Battersbee were desperate to move him from the hospital behind us. They described it as noisy and chaotic. They want to move Archie to a hospice where he can be at peace and have a dignified goodbye. That is what they wanted. They had a timeline yesterday of 9 o'clock yesterday morning. That was the deadline for them to have this legal bid in, and we know that lawyers were working throughout the night to get that legal bid in. They just met that deadline. It was heard yesterday in the High Court. That continued this morning, and we've just had that through, that has been denied. I've actually just got the ruling through, so I can share this with you now, Bevan. It's the first time I'm reading it as well. It says, the judge said Archie's best interests must remain at the core of any conclusions that have been reached by this court. When considering the wishes of the family, why those wishes are held, the facilities that are hospice, and what Archie is likely to have wanted, including the risks involved in a transfer and the fragility of his medical conditions, I am satisfied when I am looking at a balancing act exercise that he should remain at the hospital when treatment is withdrawn. So there you go. That is what the judge has ruled today in the High Court, that in Archie's best interest he should not be moved from the hospital. Now that is in line with what the hospital have been saying about this. They say that Archie is in a very fragile condition, that nurses and doctors have to be very careful even when moving him in the bed, let alone putting him in an ambulance and moving him to a hospice. They have always said it is in Archie's best interest to keep him at the hospital when his life support treatment is withdrawn. But now that has been confirmed by the High Court. The parents there have lost their bid to move Archie Battersbee from the Royal London Hospital to a hospice to die. We're not sure yet, Bev, whether the parents will appeal this decision. They have appealed any legal decision that's gone against them so far. I suppose it depends how much fight they've got left in them at this stage, but Archie's mother, Holly Dance, did promise Archie that she would fight till the bitter end, so I wouldn't be surprised if we do hear an appeal being pledged this afternoon.
Welly, thank you very much. A lot of people will be very saddened by that. I guess we have to just conclude that the judge made the decision under the influence, I guess, of the medics. Okay, it is World Breastfeeding Week. Change of pace. And despite the fact that the World Health Organization recommends that all babies should be exclusively breastfed for their first 6 months, only 1% of UK mothers are reaching this target. We know a lot of you at home are new mums who watch this programme. So here to discuss parts of the reason of why this could be the case is Professor Caroline Flint, a midwife of only over 40 years experience. And I have to say, and this is a coincidence, Caroline, because I didn't know that they'd booked you, but you were my midwife. You caught my first baby. It is so lovely to see you. It gives me goosebumps to see you because, as any mum will know, midwives play a very, very special role in our life. And I can't believe that we're here nearly 20 years later still talking about the fact that we haven't got a grip on breastfeeding. Why are we so bad in this country at helping more new mothers to breastfeed?
Well, it's absolutely gorgeous to see you, Bev, I must say. But why are we so bad? Because it's so bloody difficult. Breastfeeding is one of the most difficult things I have ever experienced. I breastfed 3 babies for 9 months very happily, but women today it's much more difficult breastfeeding in 2022 than it has ever been before. Women in 2022 have so much intervention, so much interference. They lose so much blood during the childbirth process that their bodies are busy trying to replace the blood they've lost, which comes above producing milk. They also get very little support because they don't get midwives popping in to make sure they're all right. They just have to do it on their own. My suggestions for any women who are struggling with breastfeeding at this moment is remove your clothes. Keep your knickers on because you'll be bleeding. Remove your clothes, get into bed, make sure that somebody's going to cook you your lunch and things like that. Get into bed naked with your baby and have your baby as naked as possible. Obviously, it needs a nappy on. And because we're mammals, we need skin-to-skin contact. The baby needs to be snuggled up next to you and your nipple needs to be available to the baby, which is not going to be if the baby's over there in a Moses basket and you've got clothes on.
It's so lovely to hear your kind of common sense. We're slightly sniggering here in the studio because you've just told women to keep their knickers on. But I love this, Caroline, because this is what we need to hear. We need to take it down to the basics. We have so much fetishization of pregnancy and new motherhood. And there are a lot of... I don't want to be criticising new mothers. It's the hardest job in the world, as you and I have talked about many times over the years. But I think there is so much pressure to look good for Instagram, to have your baby in one hand and your phone in the other. And we need to get back to basics and allow women to be their primal selves, I think is what you're saying.
Yes. I mean, I suggest that women should stay in bed for 10 to 14 days after birth. I mean, obviously get up to do a pee, get up to do a poo, get up to have a shower, but have your meals in bed and just lie there with the baby. Get to know the baby, get to know what it's saying to you, get to know how it reacts, and help it to find your nipple. I mean, it's not easy breastfeeding, and if you're busy trying to do everything else and put your makeup on and all the rest of it, ridiculous. It just doesn't work.
Easy. It isn't easy, and sadly, and I think it's interesting that you say it's harder now than it's ever been in 2022, because what I found in my experience, you were literally the woman fiddling with my nipples, Caroline, to help me breastfeed. But what most women don't have is they don't have that support of another woman, and we tell women you must breastfeed. Breast is best. Breastfeeding is easy. Oh, it's easy. You'll all do it. And then we send them home without support. And then it's no wonder that they feel like they've failed, and then they feel guilty. We are letting down women so badly.
Yes, we are. And you see, the tragedy is when you breastfeed, when you manage to breastfeed, it is divine. You know, you undo your front and the baby goes, and the baby loves your breasts. And when you're feeding and you're looking down at the baby, it comes away from your breast and looks up to smile at you. It's just beautiful. And it's such a good way to feed a baby, and the babies flourish so much. Now, you said I'm the one who did things with your nipples. I bet I didn't, because I rarely touch women ever, because I think it's the women themselves who need to be doing it. So if the baby has access to your breast, and that's the problem. At the moment, babies don't get access to the breast. They're stuffed somewhere in a Moses basket or a buggy or something, and they need to be really near the breast so they can just go and suck.
Caroline, it's so lovely to see you. I think the message we just want women to take away is don't suffer in silence. It isn't easy. Get help. Reach out. There are great organisations. Pester your midwives. Pester the hospitals. If you want to breastfeed, then get some help to do so. And don't think it's easy. It is lovely to see you, Caroline. And also, just for our viewers, Professor Caroline Flint, she was and continues to be one of the most influential midwives across the globe. She was a pioneer for natural birth, pioneer for water birth, and she's a heroine of mine. Thank you so much, Caroline.
Thank you, Bev. Lovely to see you. Lovely.
Now, the Commonwealth Games are well underway, with England trailing Australia on the medal table with 110, 7 of which were won single-handedly by my next guest. Tom Dean, MBE, has just become England's most decorated athlete at a single Commonwealth Games, walking away from Birmingham with a special gold medal for the men's 4x100 metres medley relay, beating Australia no less after 6 successive silvers in the pool. I'm so happy to see you now, Tom. Welcome to Daytime TV. I bet you've not had another conversation about breastfeeding today, have you?
No, my first one today.
Excellent, good. But you are doing the rounds. You're a bit of a superstar here at the moment. You brought your medals along. How was it?
It was absolutely incredible. You know, I've been saying to everyone, such a special experience, and you know, at a home game, something that I probably only get one in my career. You know, the crowd was exceptional up in Birmingham. I think, you know, we've missed this for 2 years, haven't we? Like live sport, and especially for swimming, that arena was packed every single time. And like you said, that gold on the relay on the last day was just like the best possible way to top it off. So
you're 22, are you now?
Yep, 22.
So where do you see yourself in your swimming career? You're just reaching your peak, right, Tom?
Yeah, so they say the peak's kind of 23, 24, so I think I've still got, you know, another year or two before I hit it. But, you know, the career span for an athlete, obviously it's individual, but, you know, people go on to their late 20s. So, yeah, hopefully a few more years in the sport.
So you've got 2 Olympic gold medals already?
Yep.
First one in the 200 free?
Yes.
And then a relay?
In the relay, yeah.
Right. What about the next Olympics? You must be going for... Are you still doing 200 free? Or are you going to just pick another event, which you are brilliant?
At random.
What are you going to do?
No, so I've obviously 200 freestyle is the main event for me. That's the main focus. But you're right, I just did the 2 events at the Olympics last year. Obviously, 2 gold medals was the best possible outcome I could ask for. But the thing that I'm trying to do, my coach and I are really working on, is expanding the amount of events I do. You know, the depth of my event schedule, my race schedule at these competitions. So that's why I entered, you know, 7 events at this Commonwealth Games. I did 6 events at the World Championships just a few weeks ago, and I'm really kind of testing the water, seeing how much I can push myself. Because with every event, not just the single race, but it's the heat, it's the semi, and it's the final. So I'm swimming 12, 13, 14 times at these competitions. So it's a really, really demanding schedule. But now's the time to really kind of test the waters with Paris 2 years away. And luckily, you know, the stars aligned. I was able to walk away with that magical 7.
So my brother was a 400 metres IM British record holder, and I swam competitively. I didn't swim internationally. I can't claim any credit for that, but a decent national level. So I have an idea of what it is that your training schedule has been like. Any parents at home watching this who've got little ones who are starting to swim now, it's quite a commitment, isn't it, to be a swimming family?
It is quite a commitment. It's a lot of early mornings, and it's one of those sports where you've just got to put the hours in. It's unavoidable. You know, my mum had us all bundled in the car at 5 a.m. every single morning. You know, I'm one of 5 siblings, and we all swam together at some point. So we're all, you know, on the way to the pool at a stupid o'clock.
Where did you grow up? What was your team?
So Maidenhead was my small local club. Near Reading, exactly. So I was there for 10 years, from 8 years old right the way till I turned 18 and I joined the National Centre.
What age did you start really ramping up the hours?
I think it was probably kind of my mid-teenage years. You don't even realise you're doing 3 sessions, and your coach's like, well, come for this Thursday morning or this Saturday morning, and then you do an 8, and then all of a sudden I'm at a national centre, I'm doing 10 swimming sessions, 4 gym sessions, and it's a full-time job. So yeah, throughout my teenage years, it was just that relentless, drive to get better and commitment to the sport.
And what about when you stop swimming? Do you have any idea what you want to do then? Because that's tough, because when you retire as an athlete.
It is tough, and I think it's not just unique to swimming. I think that's across all sports. Athletes, when they call it a day, they can struggle because you're so regimented. Your week looks the same. Your year, you're building towards a Worlds or a Commies or an Olympics, whatever it might be, and then when you call it a day, it can be quite tough. Hopefully, I've got quite a few more years in the sport, so I haven't planned exactly what I'm going to do after just yet.
What was it like for you as an athlete in lockdown? Because I think if you were an elite athlete, you could still train, couldn't you? Were the pools closed? Or the pools were closed for normal people like us, but they were kept open for you guys.
So there was a return to training protocol put in by the government for elite athletes, and I was fortunate to be one of those elite athletes selected. But it was not until slightly further on in that first lockdown. So I think we were out the water for between 10 and 12 weeks, if I remember correctly.
What was that like? Because that would be the first time in your living memory that you could imagine not swimming for that time.
Exactly.
Did you go and get in the river or something to satisfy your needs?
I did actually get in the river, yeah. So in Maidenhead, we're really close to the river, so I dived in and I was swimming a few whips and stuff like that. But no, it was surreal. It was people don't get that time out of the water until they retire. Even throughout the year, we don't get that long off. So it was quite surreal. It was really different, but I think it was good to kind of take a step back and have a look at how it all gone.
Because one of the worst things I think, Tom, of the last few years, especially like as a mum with my kids, is a lot of those kids who started doing competitive sport didn't go back. They had that massive break, and then they just couldn't quite get back into it. Do you think that how many? I think we've lost quite a few potential future Olympians, I would have thought.
I think so. It is tough, when you take a long break out to get back into it. And I think there's a whole generation that lost. My little brother swims for Maidenhead, and he lost a year and a half of training, which is so tough. Like I said, I was doing those mornings throughout my teenage years, and he had 18 months out the water, so it's really tough to get back into it.
It's great for fitness, though, right? Great for fitness. We've got a problem with obesity in young people, and we stop them doing sport. The best sport for fitness, works your full body, and I think everyone should at least learn to swim at school. And what about the pools that will not open? We've now got a problem. About 20% of leisure centres, it's estimated, won't open again. That's bad, right?
It is really tough, and luckily we've got great facilities like Sandwell Aquatics that are going to be used for the public and for years to come. But no, I think it is tough when leisure centres are struggling throughout the COVID.
Tom Dean, it is lovely to meet you. Thank you so much. Well done. Thank you on behalf of England. Thank you on behalf of Great Britain for your next Olympics as well. We will be watching you. Right, that's it for today. Thank you all for watching as well. I'll be back a little later. I'm covering for Alex Phillips this afternoon on We Need to Talk About at 2 o'clock. But next, Simon Pusey has... well, actually, no, Simon's not there. We're going to the weather. It's a lovely day. Why not? See you later.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather outlook. Not much rain in the forecast across the south. A dry one here today and sunny for most of us through this weekend, thanks to a large area of high pressure that's slowly moving in across the country, and it's going to stick around through the weekend and beyond. This weather front will bring a bit more cloud tomorrow across the north. And today across the north, we do have some showers. We've already seen 1 or 2 heavy ones and a scattering of showers over North Wales, northern England and parts of central and eastern Scotland will continue. Hit and miss, not everywhere seeing them, but where they do occur, so the odd heavy one is possible, but tending to ease off, I suspect, through the afternoon. Sunny spells for western Scotland, Northern Ireland and across the south, where temperatures getting into the mid-20s. high teens, low 20s for most. So actually a little cool for the time of year. It'll be a fairly cool evening as well. Still a few showers around this evening if you're heading on the roads across northeast England, eastern Scotland, but they'll quickly fade away. For most, it's going to be a dry night, but that weather front we saw earlier will start to bring the rain back to the Highlands of Scotland and the Western Isles through the early hours. A fresh start to the weekend. It really will be quite a cool night, certainly compared to earlier in the week. Temperatures widely down to single figures. A sunny start to the weekend, certainly for most of England and Wales. A cloudy start for Scotland and Northern Ireland. There will be some rain pushing through parts of Scotland, but come late morning it'll mostly be confined to the far north, with just a few showers likely through the central belt. The odd shower for Northern Ireland, mostly dry here. Certainly sunny spells for the majority across England and Wales. And after a cool start,